What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, we are going to be doing our third and final look at a potential blueprint for this Packers offseason. I'm going to be going over two scenarios today. So what we've done already, remember, is 2 days ago, we looked at a all-in approach with Aaron Rodgers coming back, mortgaging a ton of the future, and doing everything possible to make this team successful in 2023. That was sort of approach number one. Approach number two yesterday was the all-out approach, the rip the Band-Aid, the burn it all down. Jordan Love at quarterback, going extremely young, probably hoping for some high or top draft picks over the next couple seasons, and then, starting to look at competing again in 25, 26, etc. So we've done those two so far. Today, I'm going to go two middle ground options. Basically, a middle ground option for Aaron Rodgers that's a little bit all in-ish. There's no real way to get around it. If Rodgers is back, you're going to have to borrow more from the future, but not quite as all in as our previous one. And then also a scenario where you bring Jordan Love back, but you kind of keep this team together. You keep the Aaron Joneses and the David Bakhtiaris, try to build some consistency with this team so that Jordan doesn't take over and just have nothing at his disposal, right? So we're going to go over two additional scenarios today. And then at the end, I'll go over which one I kind of like the best and kind of rank them 1 through 4. As always, ignore the names. This is not an exercise in me trying to predict what's going to happen this offseason. The draft picks, the names of the free agent signings, that stuff you can all switch around. You could pick a different position to sign a free agent at. You could pick a different position to draft in the first or second round and hope that you're going to get some immediate ROI from. There's things that you can change, but going through these 4 scenarios, hopefully you have a better understanding of which decisions are going to have to come at some point. The contracts for Yosh Nijman and Darnell Savage and all the veteran players that you could potentially get off their contracts or extend or, restructure, etc. So those are the type of things that I want to take a look at overall as we go through this entire process. It's not to, again, ultimately predict which names are right in the right spots. It's just to go through some scenarios and just to kind of give you an idea of what Brian Gutekunst and Russ Ball in this front office is going to have to decide as they go through this extremely complex, extremely important offseason. So without any further ado, here is today's 2 scenarios, and back to Spreadsheet Andy. All right, so Spreadsheet Andy is officially back, and once again, we're going to be going over 2 different scenarios, the first of which is the Aaron Rodgers scenario. So Aaron Rodgers is back, but they decide that they're going to do really probably the most Packers thing possible, right? They're going to take a flyer on a couple free agents like they have with Devondre Campbell. Rasul Douglas was midseason, but like they did with Devondre Campbell, Jerron Reed, Pat O'Donnell, they're going to grab a couple of low-price free agents, and they're going to build through the draft. They'll keep a couple of their own guys, but this is going to be a very normal Packers offseason. They want to keep as many of their guys as possible. They're going to build through the draft and take a couple free agent flyers. So it's not an all-in approach like we did a couple days ago. It's not all that different because you still have to borrow a significant amount from the future if you sort of want to make this work. But this is another sort of, just keep Rodgers and kind of do the same sort of philosophy that Green Bay's done for years, or at least in these past few seasons with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. So we've got our normal roster here, our beginning point that we've used the last couple days. A couple things different. Obviously, we've got Aaron on the contract. In this scenario, we're going to keep Yosh Nijman. Again, this is sort of the classic Brian Gutekunst example. This is this is how the Packers usually think, and probably maybe the closest to what's actually probably going to happen, assuming Aaron is back this offseason. But so they're going to keep their own guy. So Yosh is back on a second round tender. And yeah, that's, sort of the basis. We've got our same free agents here: Cobb, Lazard, Lewis, Tunyon, Lowry, Reed, Hollins, Wilson, Ballantyne, Nixon, Amos, Ford, Levitt, and Crosby, and our same restricteds in Tyler Davis and Chris Barnes. Again, you guys have seen this roster the last couple days, so you basically know the ins and outs of where the starting point is. Again, if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes, I highly recommend that you do that so you kind of have a better understanding of what we're going through today. But again, you'll be able to make it through even if you didn't. All right, so we're going to make some quick cuts just as we have the last couple days. We're going to cut Patrick Taylor. We're going to cut Jonathan Garvin, Ladarius Hamilton, and Pat O'Donnell. We're going to have some cap hits off of that, some dead cap hits, including O'Donnell and Garvin, but nothing egregious. This just clears a little bit of cap space, gives us a little bit more flexibility. And then in every single one of these scenarios, like the Darnell Savage, getting off of that $7.9 million contract, they basically have 3 options, right? They can play him at 7.9. That's going to be extremely hard. You look at the 2 of these contracts, right? the Yosh Nijman, the 4.3 million Yosh Nijman contract, and then the 7.9 million Darnell Savage contract. Having both of those on the roster makes things extremely difficult. And as we've kind of gone through these decisions over the past few days, with Savage, if you don't get off of that, keeping 7.9 really kind of handcuffs you for some of the other moves that you're capable of doing. And then, the other option is that you sort of like give him an extension, but you just benched him last year. That's not ideal. And you can't cut him because the 7.9 million is fully guaranteed. So you're just in no man's land. So I do think trading him in some sort of deal, whether it's the one we've been discussing where you trade like Savage in a 4th for a player in a 7th, I think that personally makes sense. Maybe he's part of a Jordan Love deal and you say, hey, you get Jordan Love, but you're going to have to take Darnell Savage along with it. Maybe there's some other things that they could possibly do here. But in this scenario, Darnell Savage is going to get traded once again, a Savage in a 4th for 7th and a player. I think the Bears make a ton of sense still here. One other thing I failed to mention, in this scenario for today, Packers like keeping their own guys. We could have some issues with Jordan Love and wanting to stay in Green Bay if he's not going to be the starter. I would understand that, but Green Bay might play hardball. So for this episode as well, Jordan Love is going to stay on the roster. So we've got Rodgers and Love here, which is a different way that we've done things in the past couple days. So both of them still on the team. Again, Darnell Savage is traded. And then we've got some restructures that we're going to do. So we're not going to go quite, again, the all-in scenario. First of all, in the restructures that we are doing, we're not using any void years. So we're going to do restructures without using void years. So we're not going to go completely insane with these. We are going to restructure Aaron Jones. We are going to restructure David Bakhtiari. We are not going to do anything with Runyon because the only way is to do it with void years. We are going to restructure Kenny Clark. We're going to extend Rashawn Gary, so we're going to give him a big extension. He's going to end up making $7 million against the cap this year. We are going to restructure Preston Smith. We are not going to do anything with Campbell. We are not going to do anything with Rasul. We're going to keep our flexibility open if we need it later this season, or the flexibility to potentially move on from them next year if that's what you wanted to do. And then we're going to restructure Jair Alexander as well. So one extension, Gary, a lot of restructures, but Runyon, Douglas, and Campbell do not get restructured, and we're not using any of the crazy void restructures either, which is going to not, again, quite go all in and not hamstring us quite as much in the future. I was really looking for a way that we could have done this without doing the David Bakhtiari restructure, which if he ends up having injury issues would have given you a better out next year. It was just really difficult to do so. So we end up doing a light restructure on Bakhtiari as well. So those are our restructures and extensions that we're doing in this scenario today. All right, then we're going to re-sign some players. Rodgers is back, so with him comes some friends, right? So we're going to get Randall Cobb back. There might have to be some, dead years on top of this to get that a little bit higher. Tonyan and Lewis, same thing, might be a couple dead years to get this a little bit higher, but Tonyan and Lewis back in the fold as well. We're going to bring Keyshawn Nixon. This is probably a longer-term deal with a lower cap hit in the first year and then higher cap hits in like year 2, year 3, maybe year 4. Rudy Ford and Dallin Levitt back. I think those are probably 1-year deals that you can get them at. And then Mason Crosby back as well in this scenario. Once again, we might need to add a little bit here, but I think that actually seems like a fair rate for Mason Crosby if he's coming back. You don't want Crosby, that's okay. Take a different kicker that you would like instead and put him here instead of the $2.5 million. It's not that big of a difference. You get the point overall. So Cobb, Tonyan, Lewis, Nixon, Ford, Levitt, and Crosby are back. You can see we are under the cap. We've still got our $7 million slush fund. We've still got our practice squad accounted for, and we've got about $8 million in cap space. So we've got a little bit of room to play with. All right, are we going to sign any free agents? We're going to do the very Green Bay Packer thing, right? We are going to sign a couple free agents that we're going to take a flyer on. Guys who are first and second, or I think second round picks. I can't remember if Campbell was a first or a second, but Juan Thornhill was a second. We're going to take some flyers on some guys that were high draft picks that didn't turn out extremely well. Once again, we might need to add some years on top of this. I think Spotrac had Paris Campbell at like a $2.5 million deal is what they're expecting. Thornhill hasn't had a huge career in Kansas City, but we're going to take a flyer on both of those. This is very Green Bay Packer, right? Take a flyer on Devondre Campbell. Take a flyer on a Jerron Reed. Hopefully that they're going to play a little bit better in Green Bay than they did in previous seasons. So we're going to pick up a wide receiver with some run after the catch ability. We're going to pick up a safety who has great athleticism, just hasn't necessarily clicked in KC. So that's going to give us some unique options moving forward. And then we're going to move on to the draft. All right, so in this draft, we get Kenny McIntosh, running back, in the 5th round. We get Jackson Smith and Jigba, which of course we get a first round wide receiver. That never happens. So of course this will probably never happen either. But without being able to, like, in this scenario, you just don't have the money to go out and spend a ton of money on a wide receiver. I was looking at ways that, like, maybe you could go out and get a DeAndre Hopkins. It's just extremely difficult with the way his contract's set up. So we're going to use our first round pick on a wide receiver. So Smith and Jigba is in Green Bay. Darnell Washington, the tight end, in the 2nd round. We get Caleb Chandler in the 7th on the defensive line. On the offensive line. Jared Clark in the 7th on the defensive line. Jair Brown, a safety, in the 3rd. Quindell Johnson, a safety, in the 5th. And Ethan Evans, a punter, in the 7th. So we have a fairly successful draft, kind of acquire some positions of need, including wide receiver, tight end, and then safety as well. And punter, of course. So that's our draft. We're going to then, of course, attack undrafted free agency, just as we have in every other scenario so far. We're going to bring back Justin Hollins. We didn't really get a edge rusher in the draft. We're going to get EJ Speed at linebacker. We didn't really hit inside linebacker in the draft. So we're going to hit a couple of those spots just because we didn't, unfortunately, we weren't able to find anyone in the draft at those positions, just the way that the draft played out. So other than that, we're going to sign a bunch of players to undrafted free agents deals. Cut down time, gone is Etling, Goodson, Bo Melton, Jeff Cotton, Austin Allen, Gugames, Tenuta, DeLance, Royce Newman we're going to cut in this situation, Chris Slayton, Shamar Jean-Charles, Tyrell Ford, Benji Franklin, Dallin Levitt, and James Wiggins, as well as Parker White and our undrafted free agent specialist. So, and a bunch of other undrafted free agents. So what does that leave us with in the non-all-in, but Rodgers is back, and we're going to have a very Green Bay Packers-esque offseason, couple flyer free agents, build through the draft, re-sign your own guys, etc. What does that look like? That looks like Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love at quarterback, Jones, Dillon, and McIntosh at running back, Watson, Smith and Jigba, Dobbs, Campbell, Cobb, and Toure at wide receiver, Tunyon, Lewis, Washington, DeGuara at tight end, Bakhtiari, Nyman as your starting tackles. You got Caleb Jones and Rasheed Walker still. You got Jenkins and Runyon with Ryan and Chandler backing up. And then you've got Zach Tom and Josh Myers. I do think if this were the situation that Zach Tom could potentially compete with Josh Myers at center. If Myers is still your starter, Tom is just, you could have Tom start at tackle instead of Nyman, or you could just have Tom as your super sub basically everywhere, right? So you've got some options along the offensive line. Clark, Wyatt, Slayton, your primary defensive linemen. Gary and Igbare and Smith, your primary edge rushers. Campbell and Quay, Jair, Stokes, Douglas, and Nixon. Thornhill, Jair Brown, your 3rd round pick as your starting safeties. Not ideal, but let's be real. Safety was the Packers' worst position a season ago with Savage and Amos. So even though you got a flyer free agent guy and a 3rd round pick, a 5th round pick, and Rudy Ford, this might actually still end up being significantly better than what the safeties played at in Green Bay a season ago. So you're not super concerned there. Mason Crosby, a kicker, Ethan Evans, your rookie punter, and then you bring Coco back as well. Now notice here, we were able to just get under the salary cap, plus we have, or where we were kind of shooting for, plus we still have that $7 million slush fund, plus we still have a couple levers we can ultimately pull in season. If all of a sudden this team starts, playing and they're, 8-1 or, 7-2 or something like that, and they're a really good team, and at the trade deadline you have the opportunity to maybe go get a player, or a free agent becomes available, they'd have some flexibility to still go out and get a player and address a position. So you've got a decent overall team. Wide receiver, it's going to be really dependent upon how these players step up. Watson and Jigba and Dobbs. You got a flyer on Campbell. You still got Cobb back. Toure's showed some flashes in year one. You've got a good running back group. Darnell Washington, getting him at tight end in the 2nd round. Like, you've added some weapons here, right? Smith and Jigba, Paris Campbell, Darnell Washington, Kenny McIntosh. Like, you've reloaded some of your weapons. It's just going to be dependent on how good some of those guys are in their rookie years. And then the safety position is going to be kind of the big question mark, with really the rest of your defense kind of returning and getting Rashawn Gary back. So not terrible, right? And this is, like I said, a very Green Bay Packer-esque offseason that we've seen sort of Brian Gutekunst operate over the course of the last few seasons. All right, so that's the last Aaron Rodgers scenario. Let's go through one more Jordan Love scenario. So in this scenario, we are going to still take our medicine with Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to take all of the cap hit this year, which is going to allow us to pick up Jordan Love's 5th-year option as well. So we're going to pick up Love's 5th-year option. He's going to be the quarterback this year, and next year we're going to give him that opportunity. And then with Aaron Rodgers, again, we are going to take our full salary cap hit this year with the $40.3 million hit. We're going to keep Yosh Nijman again in this example. And I think those are the main things to kind of keep an eye on here. So no Rodgers, Love is the QB, Yosh Nijman is in with a 2nd round tender. Same roster cuts as we've kind of been talking about. But in this situation, this is sort of like we're going to bring some of our guys back, but we need to also make some difficult decisions. In this scenario, we're going to move on from Preston Smith. He didn't have a great season a year ago, probably isn't part of a long-term plan. So we're going to hope that Gary can get back sooner rather than later. And we still have Enigbare. Maybe we attack edge rusher in the draft. Pat O'Donnell's gone, Garvin Hamilton. But the big change here is this situation. We're going to move on from Preston Smith. But unlike our nuclear option where we're going to rip the Band-Aid and get rid of everything, Jones is still on the roster. Bakhtiari's still on the roster. Nyman's still on the roster. We've got a lot of different options here that we can still go with if we ultimately need to make some different decisions here. So that's where we're starting with this Jordan Love example. Once again, we are still going to try the Darnell Savage trade. Maybe we keep him on the roster, but as I've mentioned, this is a situation that gets very, very difficult if you end up keeping him on the roster, just because like hiding $8 million is really, really tough. And I don't want to see him extended because he's not been playing well. So you got to find a unique trade for Darnell Savage. I think they can do that. I'm hopeful that they maybe will do that, but that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Some restructures and extensions. We're not going any crazy restructures here. And again, I would have loved to have not restructured David Bakhtiari, but I needed to in order to sort of make this scenario work. I think Green Bay's going to have to as well. But Aaron Jones is back. You're going to restructure him. Bakhtiari's back. You're going to restructure him. Again, these are not void year restructures. These are more simple restructures. Kenny Clark's going to get restructured. Rashawn Gary is going to sign his extension. Huge deal. No Campbell, no Douglas again. Jair is going to get his restructure. So we're saving some significant money here, as you can see. So that gets us through our restructures and extensions. And then we've got our free agents, right? So a couple things. We're going to bring back Justin Hollins in this scenario, especially moving on from Preston Smith. We need another edge rusher here. We're going to bring back Keyshawn Nixon, and we're going to bring back Rudy Ford as well. No real free agents in this group. Oh, sorry, veteran QB. I sort of meant to highlight this one and didn't, so my apologies for that. But veteran QB, this is where I say like names don't matter. I'm not even putting a name in there. You're going to sign a veteran QB to come in and be the backup to Jordan Love. So that's going to be one of the key ones. But again, we don't even need to necessarily put a name right there. So veteran QB, we're going to bring back Hollins, Nixon, and Rudy Ford. No other free agents. So Cobb, Lazard, Lewis, Tunyon, Lowry, Reed, Wilson, Ballantyne, Amos, Levitt, Crosby, Davis, and Barnes have all played their last downs as Green Bay Packers. All right, we've got a draft now. We're going to get Jalen Hall, a quarterback in the 7th round. We're going to get Jalen Hyatt, a running back a receiver in the 2nd round. We're going to get Nolan Smith, an edge rusher, Georgia, of course. How could you not go in that direction if you're the Green Bay Packers? 1st round pick at edge rusher. We're going to get Carlton Marshall, a 7th round inside linebacker. 5th round pick, Julius Brents, a corner. Jair Brown again, 3rd round pick safety. Rashard Torrance, a 5th round pick safety. And Ethan Evans, a 7th round pick punter. Undrafted free agents and sort of random pickups. We're going to once again get Max Williams to help out our tight end room. Probably a cheap signing. He's a solid blocker, okay receiver, maybe bouncing back. Like this last year, he was coming back from a significant injury. Hopefully he bounces back this year. We're also going to go and get Joey Sly on the cheap. All of the rest are just undrafted free agents. So we're going to get our cuts ready. We're going to cut Danny Etling, Patrick Taylor, Jeff Cotton, Gugamis, DeLance, Royce Newman in this scenario, Chris Slayton, Shamar Jean-Charles, Keandre Thomas, Tyrell Ford, Benji Franklin, James Wiggins, Parker White, and a lot of undrafted free agents. And then what does this final Jordan Love scenario look like? We've got Love, some veteran QB, and a 7th round flyer on Jaron Hall, Jones, Dillon, Goodson, Watson, Dobbs, 2nd round pick in Hyatt, Toure, Bo Melton, undrafted free agent, Max Williams, DeGuara, Austin Allen. We still got Bakhtiari, Tom, Yash Nyman. Again, Tom could compete with Myers here as well. Jenkins and Runyon, your starting guards with Sean Ryan coming back. Clark, Wyatt, Slayton, Jonathan Ford, and an undrafted free agent along the line. Rashawn Gary and 1st round pick Nolan Smith. Enigbare backing up, Hollins behind him. Campbell, Walker, McDuffie, and 7th round pick Carlton Marshall. Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon with Julius Brents, the draft pick, and an undrafted free agent. Jair Brown, 3rd round pick. Rashard Torrance, 5th round pick. Rudy Ford, Carpenter Gaines, Sly, Evans, Coco. Still got our slush fund, still got our practice squad. This one, we came in a little over budget. This is going to bring that slush fund down to probably around 5 million, maybe 4 million with some dead cap hits as well. That's not ideal, but there are still some levers to pull that Green Bay can. The goal is to just basically fill the roster the remainder of the year in this situation with basically minimum contract guys. So you probably don't need as much of a slush fund, but they're probably going to have to pull another lever at some point to open up some additional cap. Maybe they end up restructuring Rasul Douglas as a way to open up some money, Devondre Campbell as a way to restructure some money or save some money. So there's some different options there that they can use as well. So we've now gone through 4 different scenarios, right? We've gone through the all-in scenario, the all-out scenario, a middle ground for Love, and a middle ground for Aaron Rodgers. If I were to rank these 1 through 4, let me just start by saying, give me an A or give me an F, meaning go the extreme routes. The middle ground routes are probably your worst case scenario. I do think the middle ground Rodgers route that we talked about today is kind of what I see Green Bay doing this offseason if Aaron does ultimately come back. I don't think they're going to go and take in a complete all in and just completely mortgage the future to try to do everything that they can. They may try to not give up on Jordan Love. I don't know that they'd bring back an Allen Lazard, but maybe they'd bring back a Cobb and a Tunyon and a Lewis for him. Grab a couple flyer free agents that they hope they can, get a really good ROI on again, but no exorbitant high-end free agent, no crazy high-end trade. I think that's probably the scenario that is closest to what I think Green Bay will do, the one we went over first today. But if I had to order these, to me, I'm going more towards the rip the Band-Aid approach. First of all, with maybe a tweak here or there. Maybe you keep an Aaron Jones in that situation just as, sort of a transition player, somebody that's really great for the locker room. But overall, I'm closer to the rip the Band-Aid approach. Then I would be probably the all-in Rodgers approach. If you're going to bring back Rodgers, do it the right way. Hope that he plays like an MVP again and just do as much as you possibly can to get him every ounce of help that he needs and make your run at it. And that's not the direction that I would go. But like I said, give me an A or give me an F. Give me one of the extremes. That's probably my second. My third would probably be the Rodgers one from today. And the fourth would probably be the middle ground Jordan Love. To me, that really doesn't help anyone. And the reason I say that is you're still borrowing a ton from the future. You're keeping guys like Jones and Bakhtiari on the roster, but you've got Jordan Love at quarterback. Unless you think that Jordan Love is just ready to play at a very high level right now, then yeah, maybe go more in that direction and see what you can kind of pull off in his first year. But for me, rebuild and really ripping the Band-Aid is my best approach. If not, go all in with Rodgers. See if you can make something crazy happen. See if he has one last year of magic in it. If not, then you've got to go nuclear next year for sure. And then, like I said, the middle ground ones are less appealing to me just because I don't think you're either hurting Aaron or you're hurting Jordan in the middle ground. If you're bringing back Aaron and you're not going all in, why? What are you doing? If you bring back Aaron, go all in. Just do it. Because you're going to have to go nuclear at some point anyway, next year anyway, basically. So just go all the way. And same thing the other way. If you're going to bring back Jordan, you're not going to probably compete at any sort of high level the next 2 years. So why are you half-weighing it? Go all out. This team, you're going to sell out Lambeau every single week. You're going to have, your fans that are understanding that this is a bit of a rebuild, and we'll get through it, right? So rebuild, all in, and then middle ground options, with probably the Love one being my last option in that scenario. But either way, this isn't to, again, predict what I think is going to happen. This isn't to, try to get, I'm not going to be, 4 months from now, hey, remember when I, said that, the 7th round punter was going to go to Green Bay, got that one right. It's not meant for that, right? This is not what we're trying to do. What I hopefully accomplished in these 3 episodes and in these 4 scenarios over the last 3 days is just to give you an idea of what restructures Brian Gutekunst is going to have to consider, what cuts Brian Gutekunst is going to have to consider. The Josh Nijman 2nd round tender becomes a lot more complicated depending on what they want to do. The Darnell Savage contract is extremely complicated, and what they ultimately want to do with that, and can they find a creative way to get off of it. They're going to have to fill some spots with some players, either young or some flyer free agents. No matter, every single one of these scenarios had we need to fill our roster with some veterans at the end because we can't really attack everything via the draft and just bringing back our own guys. So no matter what happens, there's a lot of options that happen at every step of the way, from restructuring to re-signing to extensions to trades to draft to undrafted free agency to filling the roster to roster cuts, etc. It's all going to be a really crazy journey. And like I've said this entire time, this is a franchise altering offseason. Anything that happens surrounding Aaron Rodgers, whether it's another all-in or whether it's going to Jordan Love, that alters the franchise in a massive, massive way. Hope you enjoyed this exercise the past few days. Tomorrow we'll get to something different. No more spreadsheet Andy, for better or worse. We'll see what happens, but I will be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.